Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Niger Innis Presents the Trump Revolution, a part of the TvAbraham network. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we are really fortunate. The timing is really heaven sent to discuss the issues we're going to discuss today with a great American patriot who actually has tossed his hat into the ring and is running for Congress out of Arizona, which is much needed. His voice is very much needed in the United States Congress, and you're going to find out why if you don't know him already. His name is Mohammed Zuhdi Jasser. He's an American born and an American religious and political commentator and physician specializing in internal medicine and nuclear cardiology in Phoenix, Arizona. Dr. Jasser is also a former lieutenant commander in the United States Navy. Thank you for your service, Dr. Jasser, where
Thank you.
he served as a staff internist in the Office of the Attending Physician of the United States Congress. In 2003, with a group of American Muslims, Dr. Jasser reaching out to impact American culture and Muslims in America. Dr. Jasser founded the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, also based in Phoenix, Arizona. And in 2004, he was one of the founders of the Center for Islamic Pluralism. Thank you so much, Dr. Jasser. It is such a blessing to have you on today. And I really don't think the timing could be better. A couple of weeks ago when I reached out to you, I just written an article, an op-ed, the moral clarity needed to designate the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. And you agreed to join our broadcast here. And, our chemistry must have sent up a flare somewhere and it made it all the way to the Secretary of State's office because just earlier this week, uh, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said the U.S. is in the process of designating the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. So, congratulations to us who have been pushing on this for so long. And Dr. Joss, I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that and talk a little bit about the problematic history of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's just an honor to be with you. Congratulations on the program and all of your work. I miss being at ACU and CPAC with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's really, when you're talking about a quarter of the world's population that's Muslim, there is no topic I think that is more significant than, we look at the 21st century threat today. Just like in the 20th century, the Cold War threat was the Soviet Empire, and Reagan's peace through strength was essential in calling out a spade. And Nathan Sharansky said he knew he was going to be free when he had heard in his prison cell that Reagan called the Soviets the evil empire. Today's evil empire of the 21st century is the political ideology that we call Islamism or political Islam. And the archetypical example of what that is the political party known as the Muslim Brotherhood. That Muslim Brotherhood has hatched hundreds of different organizations from Al Qaeda to Hamas to organizations all across the planet. Some of them pretend to be moderate. Some of them are militant jihadist groups, just like Hamas. And you saw the horrors of October 7 that the Muslim Brotherhood through Hamas did. And as you and I have been talking for decades, back I testified to Congress in 2016 and then in 2018, initially to the House Oversight Committee on the need for political Islam and Islamism to be targeted by our security forces, domestic and globally. And then also in foreign operations to designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a foreign terrorist organization. And just to remind folks, in 2009, we sent to prison for 25 years six of the board members of the Holy Land Foundation,
Mm.
which was a trial out of a federal trial that the FBI sent them because they were giving funds to an FDO, Hamas, and were convicted. And many of the organizations that I've been fighting that have been demonizing my work were cited in that trial as being unindicted co-conspirators. So The Muslim Brotherhood, whether it exists, by name or not, is an ideology. It's a political party, just like the Communist Party, just like the Chinese Communist Party, and
Yep.
different organizational political structures. But they also have as their rubric an intent to form Islamic states, just like ISIS and the Islamic Republic of Iran and their theocracy. And they also then put into place Sharia supremacism or Islamic law when they come into place. And they use terrorism because they believe the ends justifies the means. So by any means necessary, that's why they'll invoke the horrors of October 7 to punish the Jewish community in a very anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist mechanism. And we have to understand the enemy, and the Muslim Brotherhood is the enemy.
Absolutely. And, while you and I are pleased that our State Department is moving to designate the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, and Senator Ted Cruz has a bill pending in the United States Senate, there's a companion piece in the House of Representatives as well. So it seems like the movement is taking place very dramatically in recent months in the United States to designate them a terrorist organization. But we're behind the curve, Dr. Jasser. I mean, you've got countries, including Muslim-led countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia, that have already years ago designated the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. And in preparing for the show, I stumbled upon a very interesting article that talks with a leading Swiss politician, Jacqueline de Quattro, who has warned of the danger she believes exists with the Muslim Brotherhood and what it poses for Switzerland, and says that they have already have deep penetration into French society and the religious community and the schools and at the universities. And she's saying we must act now to prevent happening in Switzerland what has already happened in France.
So, and I think one of the important things to note here is, and there's so much hand wringing and machinations in which they say, well, like what you just mentioned, a lot of these civilizational jihadists will use legal means in which to ascend and segregate our communities out so that they can radicalize them. We even see some of the Islamist sympathizers running for mayor in New York,
Yes,
Mamdani, and
which is a real
you know,
crisis and danger. If someone who has, I can't say that he has an affiliation with the Muslim Brotherhood, but I can say, and I think you would agree, he has some deep sympathies
yep,
with the Muslim Brotherhood. And for someone like that to a poll just came out a few days ago that said that he's 20 points ahead of
yeah.
the other candidates. And for someone like that to be the chief executive officer of our largest, and some would argue our most important city in the nation, and the place where the world recognizes the United States. New York City, my native New York City, is a crisis and is going to move the cultural pendulum in the wrong direction.
And what is so important, Niger, what is so important here is that it doesn't mean that we're going to designate all these Muslim Brotherhood affiliates and what I call legacy groups as terrorists right away. If Secretary Rubio, President Trump, who finally we have folks in office that have the personal strength and fortitude to take on the Islamic establishment, as they do that, it will begin to close the walls around these other organizations that are using civilizational legal mechanisms in which to radicalize our youth. So just like the Chinese Communist Party is our enemy, and we still do some business, unfortunately, with some Chinese companies, etc., that we have to globally, at the end of the day, you can push back, just as the president's pushing back with tariffs and other things. You can push back by designating the Brotherhood in Egypt as a terror organization, the Brotherhood in Kuwait, in Yemen as terror organizations. Qatar, where our largest base in the Middle East is the central cancer cell for the Muslim Brotherhood globally. Al Jazeera has 60 million Arabs that listen to it every day. Do you know that 90% of the journalists that Egypt finally, like you said, they declared them a terror organization. They fled Egypt and went to Qatar and are now working for Al Jazeera.
Oh,
So
God.
that's getting into the homes of American Muslims, into Western Muslims all over the planet, spreading ideas that are anti-American, anti-Semitic, and anti-Israel, and Holocaust denying, and all these other things. So those ideas will defeat in the war of ideas. But organizations that are advocating the beheading of our soldiers during the Iraq War, that are advocating the terror against Israeli citizens and the Jewish community, that should be put to an end by declaring them an FTO, a foreign terror organization, where they are advocating violence country by country by country.
And you said something that I think a lot of our listeners and a lot of the American people miss. Yes, the Muslim Brotherhood and their octopus of affiliates, if you will, their leviathan of affiliates all across the world are a threat to Western civilization. They are certainly a threat to Jews and promote anti-Semitism, a violent form of anti-Semitism. But here's the other critical piece. Dr. Jasser is not the lone peaceful Western adopting Muslim in the United States or the world for that matter. And I would argue the biggest threat that the Muslim Brotherhood poses is to those Muslims that just want to lead rather a decent life, that want peace and prosperity with their neighborhood in the Middle East. That's where it seems to me that the Muslim Brotherhood has the most authoritarian and tyrannical grip on the Muslim populations here in the United States and around the world, because they push this idea that their radical, extreme, violent ideology is Muslim. And if you're not a part of that violent, extremist ideology, then you're not a legitimate Muslim.
This
Talk a
the,
little bit about that.
Yeah, this is why our work is so important. And, there's a very American narrative where the founding fathers were pushing back against theocracy, which formed the greatest democracy in the world, America. And that was a pushback against theocracy. And similarly, there are Muslims marching in the streets of Iran that are pushing back against the Muslim Brotherhood version in the Shia community, which are the Khomeinists of Iran.
Yes.
So the Muslims pushing back against the theocrats, are really very American in their ideas. And we really have this bigotry of low expectations where we just want to give Muslims a participation trophy because they're participating in Western democracy, when all the while we're actually feeding their tyrants. The Islamists never were elected, and yet because of identity politics on the left, because of DEI and other aspects, they become the representatives of Muslims, when in fact most Muslims I talk to want nothing to, they came to the West like my family did, escaping those tyrannies. We formed a coalition called the Clarity Coalition. Clarity stands for Champions for Liberty Against the Reality of Islamist Tyranny. And people should go to claritycoalition.org and see we've got 60, 70 leaders from Canada, Europe, including Sweden, Denmark, and Germany, and the UK, and all over the US and into the Middle East, reformers that are Muslim, non-Muslim, atheists, Buddhists, Hindus, Christians, Jews of all faiths, that have come together, just like in the Cold War. The West had the Committee on the Present Danger that was working to unify Western ideas and testimony against the threat of the Soviet Union. Right now, we put together this coalition to show the threat of not only the Islamists, but the red-green axis, which is that axis of China, Venezuela, and other far lefties. Just like in Congress, you see the AOCs of the world
The
working with
squad.
Ilhan Omar.
Right.
That's the red-green axis in Congress. Our Clarity Coalition is ringing the alarm of the threat of the red-green axis globally, and why the UN is so useless, because the Chinas of the world are working with the Irans and the Russias to demonize Israel, to say they don't have a right to defend themselves in a war that was declared on them by Hamas. And ultimately, this is what our coalition, and if people are, just like you said, it's not just about Muslims like me that are just, happen to be, we're not an aberration. I gave a speech at Oxford back in October where I debated whether Islam is compatible with democracy. And I said, you know, I, as somebody who loves my faith, am the first to tell you that the Islam of today is not compatible with democracy. Our
Wow.
Islamic establishment is theocratic and is still in the 12th and 13th century. But I also told them, I said, if you were in Oxford in the 1600s debating whether Christianity was compatible, there was nowhere in the world that there was a secular liberal democracy under God until America was formed and the West went through its enlightenment and its
Yes.
30 years war. And that's where Islam is today. And it may be able to become compatible, but we have to treat it with equality, not with a bigotry of low expectations when we're talking about Muslims and how women are treated, how dissidents are treated, and other minority voices.
That's brilliant. And, your voice is going to be so welcome in Congress when you win. And, we need you. We need you badly, Dr. Jasser. For those, and we'll have you on again before the election to discuss your platform and your campaign, the rigors of your campaign. But for those who want to reach out to you for contributions or support of some other kind, how can they reach you?
Please go to our website at z4az.com. And this is a district that's definitely winnable. It's barely a 2 point Democrat district, and the head of the DCCC can be sent home. He's been missing in action. So this is the time. I'm the anti-Mamdani candidate, and I bring a lifetime of service in the military and also as a physician in healthcare and very much for small business and securing the border and continuing the Trump revolution and the Trump movement. So
Well,
thank you.
I have to say that the one thing I disagree with you on is that you are not the anti-Mandami candidate. Mandami is the anti-Dr. Jasser
Yes,
candidate,
sir.
who's been
Yes.
in activism for decades. I've had the pleasure of knowing him. Uh, we're going to wrap up here. And like I said, we're going to have you back on again, Dr. Jasser. But it's interesting that you've got this congressional move with, spearheaded by Ted Cruz. And of course, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has just recently said that the U.S. is moving towards making or labeling the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. Can you talk about the mechanics of which vehicle is going to be easier? Because I'm nervous about the Congress. I'm nervous about weak-kneed Democrats trying to be politically correct by not moving on the Muslim Brotherhood. My hope is that they will, but I'm a little nervous about it. So, is there executive actions that can be taken by President Trump to jump over Congress, if you will, to label them a terrorist organization?
Absolutely. I served on the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, and there are many things that the State Department we would give feedback about religious freedom issues from country to country, and the labeling of those countries as whether they were countries of concern, et cetera, was simply done by the State Department. So Secretary Rubio has the ability now, and as does the president through executive order, to basically declare them an FTO. Many of the foreign terror organizations are basically declared by the White House, and they stay as such, as Hamas has. And the Congress can reaffirm that. Now, a congressional passage of a legal designation as such is much stronger and can then withstand changes in the White House, et cetera, into the future. But at least for this administration in the next 3.5 years, it would basically be the same result. So you're right, that would be a shortcut. I think because this is a third iteration, it's the best one we've seen, and really, it's the Senate that's the more of the problem. I think the House would pass this no problem. Even there's a House member that's talking about the Council on American Islamic Relations being part of that
Yes,
designation.
fair.
So yeah, exactly, and they've been significantly a thorn in the side of what our American interests are. But at the end of the day, the Senate, hopefully Senator Fetterman and a number of others, we have to cross that 60 threshold, though. It's not just the majority in order to, get that
Right.
heard. And it's
Got to be
really
filibuster
amazing.
proof.
Yeah, it's amazing that Senator Schumer and others who should be smarter. I mean, he just wrote
Right.
a book on anti-Semitism and yet can't seem to have the intestinal fortitude to stand by those words and recognize the biggest threat to the Jewish community in America is Muslim Brotherhood legacy groups.
Absolutely. I think Schumer is an unfortunate politician that is looking over his shoulder and desperately afraid that AOC will take him on in the Democratic primary for the United States Senate. But that is no excuse. You get elected to office to do something, to get something done for your constituents, and I'm sure most New Yorkers, just like most Americans, are supportive of these efforts that are being made. Well, Dr. Jasser, that wraps up this wonderful interview. God bless you for throwing your hat into the ring. Having done it a few years ago myself, I know how much of a strain it is on you
Yes.
personally and your family. So it is a real blessing to have you in this race, and we look forward to eventually having you on again as Congressman Jasser,
Thank you.
representing Arizona. Thank you again. That ends this episode of Niger Innis Presents the Trump Revolution, and we're going to wrap up like we always do. My great father, Roy Innis, civil rights icon, always said, Niger, when you pursue life, whatever your endeavors, pursue it with TLC. And no, he didn't mean tender love and care. He meant truth, logic, and courage. God bless Dr. Jasser, and God bless you all for joining us for another episode of Niger Innis Presents the Trump Revolution, a part of the TvAbraham network. Have a great day.